Hi folks, it's John from lastchanceautorestore.com. I'd like to share with you, this is an abandoned project. So basically this was at another facility, and from what I understand, I think if I'm not mistaken, the client mentioned it's been sitting for about 14 years. So we made arrangements with the client to have it picked up in our enclosed trailer. So we just basically brought it off the trailer and brought it into our shop. So we're going to have to do a thorough inspection on this. So what we're looking at is a 1950 Ford F47 pickup truck. So there's been quite a bit of work done to it. There's some things that are puzzling us a little bit, but we're going to take a general look. I'm not sure the last time the client that owns this truck has had a chance to look at it very closely. So we're basically just going to do a walk around because these are a really nice style truck. And so basically this front hood, it appears that it's been media blasted or sandblasted, but there's no coating or anything on it. And then as we lift this up, the camera can probably pick it up. Hopefully underneath we have lots of bare metal. We've got different layers of paint, so it looks to me like this was probably originally a cream vehicle and then painted with the old style paint, the old lacquer primer and stuff. So that'll all have to be removed. It looks like part of it was sandblasted, part of it was sanded, and you can see there's a lot of exposed metal, but there's still a lot of old lacquer paint. So we're obviously going to have to deal with, because there's quite a bit going on, we've got different types of product between lacquer and newer overspray primer and stuff. So obviously we're going to have to deal with the hood. The front nose, it appears that, I don't know if there were some runs in the paint, but it looks like they painted this front clip and then sanded it in preparation of painting again, but they left the Ford logos and didn't sand around them, and they've got the grill and stuff in. So I'm assuming, I'm kind of puzzled, I'm assuming they were just dry fitting the truck to make sure that everything fit, because this nose panel, I believe, is steel. These fenders, the lower and upper, are fiberglass, and they're the better quality fiberglass fenders. And then when you look at the headlight pots, the camera can probably pick it up. These have been sandblasted several years ago, but they're going to need to be done over again because you can see all the surface rust. The rings are replacement rings that have shipping primer, but they're rusted too. So these will have to be taken apart and resanded or sandblasted. Looks like they dry fitted the chrome. We're attempting to do the marker lights, and then they kind of stopped. So that's basically the front end. And then when you look underneath the hood, there's some things that really stand out. Radiator, obviously it had some damage here. Someone has, you can still see the burn mark in it. They've brazed, looks like a split or a crack in it, and just left it. Our biggest issue so far, just walking around really quickly, is it appears that this 1950 truck has all the original wiring, and you can see how brittle everything is. I think the camera can probably pick it up. It's the original dry cord wire, and the cloth, there's all the bare metal exposed. I think the camera can probably pick that up. So it goes throughout. Notice it underneath the dash. So it appears, here's your relay, and then this, I think the camera can pick it up. So this is what we're looking at. We have brittle, dry, original 1950 wiring that has the old style cloth. It's all brittle and cracked. So someone's gone ahead and used, I would guess by the look, a couple of rolls of electrical tape, and you can see part of it hanging down. And then where all these wires kind of cluster around, believe it or not, that's a brush-on that's on top. So that's a brush-on tape that they've put, I'm assuming because there's more cracks. So this is not acceptable. This is a major fire hazard. So you can see going across here, it just has new electrical tape, but then when you come down, there's another bare wire. So we've got bare wires that are frayed, and then there's a little bit of, looks like some rubber or plastic, and there's your glass bowl with fuel in it, with this wire, which is all bare. So to do this properly, this harness needs to be removed, and we need to replace the wiring harness, because this is definitely not going to be safe at all. Looks like the engine was rebuilt. There's some detailing that's been done. These tubes looks like they've been sandblasted and painted. There's quite a bit of pitting and stuff if you look at it closely, but when the customer comes to examine, we do a thorough walk around, we'll see what he thinks of this look. Because personally, if this is the Last Chance Auto Restore restoration, we would refinish these so you don't see the pitting. So after the rust is removed with the sandblasting machine, we would smooth that and sand it, and then coat it with an epoxy, and then sand it before it's painted, and then it's all nice and smooth. You don't have the original rust circles and marks. The camera probably won't be able to pick that up. The radiator, we're not happy with that at all. That should be refurbished and redone and painted correctly. The engine, it's got the nice flathead 8. The intake has been painted the correct gray color. The engine's painted blue. That's all kind of nice. We're in Canada, so someone has put from Canadian Tire, a Motomaster battery. It's a 6 volt, which they're going to retain. You can see there's a reconditioned solenoid up on the firewall above the battery and a new cable. Not too fussy about the Motomaster visual battery, but we'll take a look at that. When we come to this side, to the driver's side of the engine, you can see there's quite a bit of corrosion and paint peeling, so it just wasn't prepped properly. I'm not sure if the lighting will pick that up, but when we move this cobbled up wiring, you can see all the paint is peeled off there. The color looks similar. I don't think it's the correct color, but it's similar, so we'll just see what the customer thinks on how tidy it is. When we come over to this side, really kind of confused about the cab and the hinges. So the hinges has never really been looked after. So you can, I think the camera can pick it up. It's got a bunch of paint that's reacting and is brittle, and then on the inside there's several coats of paint and rust. So no one's really done anything with the hinges, and they should be dealt with. Another important thing, this door skin that is supposed to be around this hinge, it's what the door has been extended further, and the door skin is damaged on both hinges. The skin itself has been beveled in, and it's pinched, so you can see it's all kinked here. So that's a major issue. This needs to be corrected. It's almost like the door skin is a little bit longer, and it's caught the hinge, and it's actually kinking, and that's going to get worse, and we see rust in behind there. So we're going to have to deal with the skin itself. The thing that I'm really confused about is, I believe once again, I guess the excuse would be dry fitting. We have, and they look like they're new, we've got new weather stripping and new vent windows and new glass, but they've installed it over top of an unfinished panel. And if I flip this back, it's not finished in there, it just has overspray. So I'm assuming that they must have painted the cab the beige or cream color like the bed, and I'm assuming, because there's lots of runs in the paint we'll share with you in the box and in the fenders, perhaps the best explanation would be they had it painted and were doing the reassembly, and then when they tried to wet sand and polish, I think they busted through the paint perhaps, and that's why they got it all sanded again to paint. So these fenders are just kind of hanging on there, the fiberglass fenders. They're not lined up properly, and it doesn't appear that they've done any dry fitting to the running boards or to the mounting. So we'll have to take a look at that, because I don't think there's any holes drilled in the back of the front fenders. So I'll have to take a look at that. Now inside, it looks quite nice when you take a first glance at it. You've got your door panels. It appears that they've painted the inside of the doors, they've painted the dash, and then they've started the reassembly of the dash. The steering column hasn't been painted or cleaned up, and the steering wheel looks like it's an original with all the cracks. They've done a nice job on the seat covering and on the piping, but then on the rocker panel here, there's numerous dents all the way along. I think the camera can pick it up. It's really, really ripply all the way across, so that hasn't been smoothed or dealt with. And then I think the camera can pick it up underneath the lower hinge where the steel meets the rocker panel. You can see there's a big gap there. So it's tack welded above and below, but that should be welded solid and kind of cleaned up. Because what's going to happen, that's going to flex, because that's the lower part of the cowl. So every time you open and close the door, over time, this is going to flex, and it's going to create a pocket of moisture to come in. But not only that, it's going to open up and stretch further, which will create more rust, and then moisture is going to get inside there. So that will have to be dealt with, I'm pretty sure. These side panels, I see that they're sandblasted in the back of the truck in a parts bin. They haven't been painted yet, and there's quite a bit of dings and dents. These are some spot welds from the factory, some spot weld holes, but there's lots of damage to the doors from work boots and so on, kicking, I think, over time. So there's numerous dents that really weren't refinished at all. There's been some grinding and welding done, but not smoothed. So that kind of stuff drives us crazy. And then they painted over all of this hardware. These should be clean. And so they've just, and there's some hangers. The paint is kind of hanging. And then we have overspray over everything. So to do this properly, all of this trim and window channels and hardware needs to be removed. And then we have to do the bodywork properly. And then fix the dings and dents, and then smooth everything out before it's painted. And the dashboard's got lots of overspray, and the color is completely different between the dash, the post, and the doors. This is considerably different color than the rest of the truck. I'm not really sure. I don't know if the camera can pick it up because of lighting, but the dash is probably, I don't know, 5 or 6 shades different than the rest of the truck. So that kind of stuff is just something that we kind of catches our eye and we wonder. And then the back window, you can see they've installed the back glass and new rubber. And then same thing with the windshield. They've installed the rubber, but then they've done a lot of sanding, and I don't know if the camera can pick it up, but the rubber, it looks like the cab's been painted a couple of times because we have overspray. You can see the masking line, and it's kind of a shame because that's all new rubber. And it looks like it's a good quality rubber. I don't think if I can flip that over. Yeah. So if we flip this open, you can see there's rust underneath there, and then the rubber has overspray on it. So this is something we would never do. You'd never paint or attempt to paint, especially that kind of surface, because you can see the surface rust in here and along the top it's exposed. So the glass needs to come out, the rubber needs to come out, the windshield frame and opening, that needs to be cleaned properly and get rid of all the rust and smoothed out. So as we come down towards the back of the truck, the bed side, originally when we went to pick it up, I thought, oh, this is going to be great because the bed is already done, the back half is done, and maybe it's not as bad as I think. But when you start to look at it closer, there's lots of runs in the paint, and I'm not sure if the camera's going to be able to pick it up, but you can see there's lots of paint hangers, and they're all, it's going from here to here, and there's big runs. There's a run here that's coming all the way down, then you have a couple of spots where there isn't any paint on. So there's some issues there. We've got another big run down by this rivet. You can see over on this other rivet, there's not enough paint on. So these haven't been treated properly. Inside the bed looks nice from a distance, but there's lots of hangers, paint hangers and body damage along the sides. There's lots of ripples and so on. There's lots of sand marks in the paint. The flooring, the camera can probably pick it up. It's just a plywood floor, and they've just laid strips over top instead of doing the proper grooved floor. And the camera can probably pick it up. There's something going on here because there's a big bow in the floor. If you follow the floor line going all the way across the bed, there's a big wow in the center that's lifted up. So something's not installed properly there. Now don't get me wrong, I'm not one, I don't like picking a vehicle apart, but when you stand and you look at it, we have fairly poor lighting here. And when I stand, I think the camera can probably pick up most of it. You can see there's body filler, and there's lots of sanding marks and sand lines all the way down the bed. And then on the sides there was a lot of paint dripping, and you can see where they've tried to wet sand. It's actually a different color. Now I'm not sure because of the digital camera if it's going to be able to pick it up, but I think you can pick it up more on this side. You can see where my end of my pen is, that's actually bare metal. And I think it can show the different colors. So all of this rippling, and it starts from here and goes all the way over, it's a totally different color, and that's from trying to wet sand and polish. And you can still see there's evidence left of paint runs, and there's still runs here on the end. So I'm assuming they've just, by trying to wet sand and polish, they've just gone too far and they've broken through. So the coloring is totally different between the top, this section, and the bottom section, because they were trying to do some repairing or hiding these a lot of paint runs. So I don't think the camera can pick it up, but if we go along, there's a lot of dimples and dents and dings all the way along. It's quite ripply, especially from here to the end. And because of our poor lighting, I apologize, I'm not sure if it's going to show up, but if you block sand this properly and you smooth it out with a guide coat, you're going to see all the ripples. And I think if our lovely camera person comes from this end and kind of goes down, you'll be able to see how, I don't know if you call it wavy, but it's very, very ripply if the camera moves in and out and up and down kind of thing. And both rails are like that. So as I mentioned, from a distance, it looks like it's a nice clean truck. But as you start to look at it closer, and keep in mind, folks, this is where the fluorescent lighting in our ceiling, I think, is what, 16 feet high. So we've got kind of poor lighting in this area. And for us to see all of this, all of these flaws, is a little bit on the scary side, because picture if this truck is at a car show or it's at a show and shine and you're in direct sunlight and the sunlight is on this, these are main features, and that's what's going to catch your eye. And to see all the ripples up and down the bed sides is quite discouraging in my opinion. And then we come down the sides, same kind of thing. The bedside looks nice from a distance, but there's lots of runs in the paint. And then these rear fenders that they painted black, there's lots of runs in the paint, and there's going to be some issues, and the camera can pick it up, I'm pretty sure. It's a little bit tougher to see black, and I'm going to have to apologize again, because we're going to have to get better lighting. But from this seam, and I'm at the back here, and there's ripples all the way along. So somebody's already tried, these are what they call in the industry hangers. So the paint was so thick, it may have been a temperature concern, that it's actually created a ridge. So all of this paint is running and it stops up here. So it goes from here to here. Now, the issue with this, ladies and gentlemen, is when we go to try to wet sand and polish this, because it's so thick, to try and get that to smooth out, it's actually going to do the same thing as the bedside. It's going to bleed through, or we're going to get into the primer. So part of the problem is, I don't think the preparation, because you can see a lot of sand marks in it, so I'm assuming they probably stopped at 320 grit sandpaper. What we do at Last Chance Auto Restore, 320 is the second last step. 320 grit sandpaper, you do see what we're seeing here. There's lots of sand marks and light scratches kind of look to it. But then you apply another coat or two of high build primer, and then you block the whole thing out at 400 grit paper, and then you wipe it all down and wet sand it at 400 before we do final paint. And that would eliminate a lot of these scratches and surface imperfections. There's less chance of paint running because it's not going to build up. It's going to lay smoother or properly. So unfortunately, it looks like to do this right. Now the body's really close. There's lots of imperfections I'll show on the side. When we go to the block sanding of the paint finish, when we go to block sand it out, we're going to see different colors, and I'll share that with you later. If the client does understand what we need to do, once we block sand it out, we would block this whole thing at 320 grit, and then we'll see the ripples and the waves, and then we'll be able to do the proper smoothing and repairs, prime it, do another sanding, and then get it to its correct 400 grit paper. The whole underside, which I apologize, I don't have a hoist available right now, the whole bottom side of the truck, all of the cross rails in the bed, the steel, they're still bare steel. So I think what's happened is the client perhaps has said to the gentleman, I want my truck back. So I think they've pre-assembled it in their defense. I think they've just, to make it easier for shipping, because this bed is just resting on the frame. And all of the rails underneath are bare metal. So they've been sandblasted, I would guess, 3 or 4 years ago. There's lots of surface rust on them, so they need to be sandblasted again. They need to be treated with a 2-part epoxy to seal the bare metal and then painted. So from underneath, the cab corners and those sections underneath the flooring are not protected. We've got some bare steel, and quite a bit. The inner fenders, the fiberglass front fenders, are covering the inner fenders, and part of them have been sandblasted, but they're bare metal also. So we're going to have some exposure to rust that you don't visually see right now. So we'll deal with that. Now, just briefly, I don't want to ramble on too long, but with the block sanding on this cab, you can see where they've sanded along, and to me this feels still fairly rough, so I'm going to guess it's 320 grit paper. The hinges are just as bad, if not worse. There's a bunch of buildup of stuff, like different coats of primer, and these are really, really rusty, and see it's all flaking. So that's just overspray, primer overspray on top of the hinges. So these are major issues for the hinges. They need to be dealt with, removed, and sandblasted properly. In the cab here we have a hole through. Where this cowl meets the roof line, we have a hole. So that's going to create some issues too. So that needs to be looked at. You can see where the hood is just roughly on. It's already scrubbing through in several locations. So there's something going on with the hinges and the hood. So we need to do some adjustments there. What we're noticing on the sides, you can see the different colors along here. These are showing us high and low spots. So it's not a matter of just give this a quick scuff and it's ready for paint. There's quite a bit of waviness going on. So we're going to need to block sand this whole thing properly. We'll have to respray it with primer, use a guide coat, and then block again. And then we're probably going to have to put some smoother in, because we're at bare metal here, which is signifying a high spot, but then we have different colors. So the gray here, for example, between the beige, these are low spots. So they're going to have to be dealt with. Same thing here. Looks like there was some damage to this door, because this is a high spot here in the half moon, but then we're low in here. So it's hard to pick up in the camera. It's one of the most difficult things to show, like even on TV programs, when they talk about restoring vehicles and doing the body work. It's so difficult to show the difference when you're block sanding from, different grits from 180 to 320. The camera generally doesn't pick it up. And from a distance, if you look at that paint, you think, wow, it looks gorgeous. But I think they stopped at 320 and they didn't do a lot of the section. So we'll deal with that and make it right. So I apologize for rambling on. Just wanted to share with you what we're going to be up against with this 1950 Ford F47 pickup. Beautiful style truck. It's got excellent potential. There's lots of new parts. The tires look new. Hubcaps and trim, and a lot of new glass. So there's a great upside with all the new parts. It's just going to need to be brought back correctly. So I thank you for watching. I'm John from lastchanceautorestore.com.